If you're turning 62 in 2026, someone in your life has probably already told you, just go ahead and claim Social Security as soon as you're eligible. Maybe it was a coworker who retired last year. Maybe it was a well-meaning family member. Maybe it was just a feeling that after decades of paying into the system, you've earned the right to start collecting the moment the door opens. And you have earned it. But here's the problem. Claiming at 62, the very first month you're allowed to, is also the single most expensive financial decision a huge number of retirees make. And most of them don't find out until years later, when the smaller checks have already been arriving for a long time and there's no way to undo it. This video, about scaring you, it's not about telling you Social Security is running out, or that the government is hiding some secret formula from you. It's about walking through, calmly and clearly, exactly what happens to your benefit depending on when you claim it, what the real trade-offs are, and how to figure out, using your own numbers, not someone else's, whether 62 is actually the right age for you, or whether waiting even a year or two could put tens of thousands of extra dollars in your pocket over your lifetime. By the end of this video, you'll understand the mechanics well enough to make this decision with confidence instead of guesswork. Let's get into it. Age 62 has a kind of magnetic pull. It's the earliest age the Social Security Administration allows most people to start receiving retirement benefits, and for a lot of people, that's reason enough. There's also a very human, very understandable psychology behind claiming early. You've worked for 40+ years. You've watched money come out of every paycheck for Social Security taxes since you were a teenager bagging groceries or working your first real job. When the calendar finally says you're eligible, there's a pull to take it, to finally get something back after decades of only putting money in. On top of that, there's genuine uncertainty. Health can change quickly after 60. Some people worry, understandably, that they won't live long enough to benefit from waiting. Others are simply ready to leave the workforce and need the income now, not later. None of these reasons are irrational. They're real, human, and in some cases, they're exactly the right reasons to claim early. But here's what almost nobody explains clearly before that first claim is filed. The decision of when to claim isn't really a yes or no decision. It's a trade-off between a smaller check for more years or a larger check for fewer years. And the math behind that trade-off is precise, permanent, and worth understanding before you sign anything. Here's the number most people don't fully absorb. If your full retirement age, the age at which you receive 100% of your calculated benefit, is 67, which it is for almost everyone born in 1960 or later, then claiming at 62 instead of 67 doesn't cost you a little. It permanently reduces your monthly benefit by approximately 30%. Not for a year. Not until you catch up. Forever. Every single check for the rest of your life is roughly 30% smaller than it would have been if you'd waited those 5 extra years. To put that in real terms, if your full benefit at 67 would have been $2,000 a month, claiming at 62 locks you into roughly $400 a month instead, permanently. That's $600 a month, every month, for potentially 20 or 30 years of retirement. Over a 25-year retirement, that gap alone at $80,000 you never receive. And that's before accounting for annual cost of living adjustments, which are also calculated off your base benefit amount, meaning the gap actually widens in dollar terms every single year as inflation adjustments get applied to two very different numbers. This is the part of the decision that rarely gets explained clearly at the counter or over the phone. The reduction for claiming early isn't a penalty in the punitive sense. It's actuarially designed so that, on average, across the whole population, people who claim early and people who claim late receive roughly similar total lifetime benefits if they live an average lifespan. The system built around that average. The real question isn't what does the average person get, it's what happens in your specific situation, and that depends heavily on one factor, or almost nobody likes to think about directly: how long you expect to live. This is the single most useful concept in this entire video, so let's slow down here. When you compare claiming at 62 versus claiming at 67, you're comparing a smaller monthly check that starts 5 years sooner against a larger monthly check that starts 5 years later. In the early years, claiming at 62 puts more total money in your pocket, because you're collecting checks the other person hasn't started receiving yet. But because the age 67 check is roughly 40 to 45% larger than the age 62 check, Month after month, the person who waited eventually catches up in total dollars received, and then passes the early claimant permanently. That crossover point is called the break-even age, and for most people comparing 62 versus full retirement age, it lands somewhere around age 78 to 80. What that means in plain terms is this: if you expect to live past your late 70s, which statistically a very large share of 62-year-olds today will, then waiting to claim results in more total lifetime income, not less. Claiming early only comes out ahead in total dollars if you pass away before that break-even age. This is exactly why claiming at 62 isn't automatically the wrong choice, and it isn't automatically the right one either. It depends on factors that are personal to you: your health history, your family's longevity patterns, whether you have a spouse who will depend on survivor benefits, and how badly you need the income right now versus later. The mistake isn't claiming at 62. The mistake is claiming at 62 without ever calculating your own break-even point, and instead just going with what feels emotionally satisfying in the moment. Here's the flip side of the coin, and it's just as important. If age 62 rewards you with a smaller check sooner, waiting past your full retirement age rewards you with a larger check for every year you delay, up until age 70. For each year you wait past full retirement age, your benefit increases by approximately 8%, guaranteed, regardless of what's happening in the stock market or the broader economy. That's not a projected return. That's not a maybe. It's a fixed government-guaranteed increase that very few other financial products can match with zero risk attached. If your full retirement age is 67 and you wait until 70, you'll receive approximately 24% more per month than you would have at 67, and close to 77% more than if you'd claimed at 62. Using our earlier example, that $400 check at 62 could become roughly $2,480 a month at age 70 for the rest of your life, with cost of living increases building on top of that larger number every year going forward. There is no benefit to waiting past age 70. The increases stop there, so 70 is the practical ceiling most financial professionals point to as the latest useful claiming age. The takeaway isn't everyone should wait until 70. Some people can't financially afford to wait, and that's a legitimate constraint, not a failure of planning. But if you can afford to wait, even delaying by a year or two beyond 62 meaningfully changes your monthly number for the rest of your life, and that's worth knowing before you file. This is the part of the conversation that gets skipped most often, and it may be the most financially significant piece of the entire decision if you're married. When one spouse claims Social Security early, it doesn't just shrink that person's own check. It can also shrink the survivor benefit the other spouse would receive after the first spouse passes away. Survivor benefits are generally based on the amount the deceased spouse was actually receiving at the time of death, not their full unreduced benefit. That means if the higher earning spouse claims early at 62 and takes the reduced amount, and that spouse passes away first, the surviving spouse could be locked into collecting that same reduced amount as a survivor benefit for the rest of their life, potentially for decades. This single detail has quietly cost surviving spouses, usually women given typical longevity patterns, enormous amounts of lifetime income, simply because the claiming decision was made based on one spouse's preferences without factoring in what happens to the other spouse later. If you're married, the claiming decision genuinely isn't just about your own life expectancy. It's a household decision that affects whichever of you lives longer. A common, financially sound strategy in these situations is for the lower-earning spouse to claim earlier, providing some household income sooner, while the higher earner delays as long as possible, maximizing the benefit that the surviving spouse will eventually depend on. This is a conversation worth having explicitly with a spouse, and ideally with a financial professional, rather than assuming both partners should simply claim at the same age for convenience. Before you can calculate any of this for yourself, it helps to understand where your benefit number even comes from. Social Security calculates your benefit using your highest 35 years of earnings, adjusted for wage growth over time. If you worked fewer than 35 years, zeros get averaged to the calculation for the missing years, which can meaningfully lower your benefit, meaning that working even a few additional years, especially if they replace early low-earning years or 0 years, can sometimes increase your benefit more than people expect. This is worth checking directly rather than guessing, because the swing between working 32 years and working 35 years can be larger than many people assume. The single most reliable way to see your actual, personalized numbers, not estimates, not averages, your real earnings-based calculation, is to create or log into your account at sci.gov and view your Social Security statement. That statement shows your estimated benefit at 62 at your full retirement age and at 70 calculated from your actual earnings record. This is the single most important step in this entire process, and it takes about 10 minutes. Every strategy discussed in this video only becomes useful once you're working with your real numbers instead of national averages, because averages can be wildly misleading for any individual situation. Rather than treating this as a single yes or no decision, it helps to work through a short list of honest questions. Do you need the income now to cover essential living expenses, or could you cover the gap using savings, part-time work, or other income for a few more years? What does your family health history look like, and how do you honestly feel about your own health and longevity? Are you married, and if so, whose earnings record is higher, and what would the survivor benefit look like under different claiming scenarios? Are you still working, because earning income before your full retirement age while also collecting benefits can temporarily reduce what you receive under what's called the retirement earnings test until you reach full retirement age? And what other retirement income do you have? Pensions, retirement accounts, rental income? That could bridge the gap if you chose to delay Social Security by a few years. None of these questions have a universally correct answer. But answering them honestly, ideally with real numbers from your sci.gov statement in front of you, turns this from an emotional decision into an informed one. A few patterns show up again and again among people who later wish they'd approached this differently. Claiming immediately simply because the option became available, without ever running the numbers on what waiting even 1 to 3 years would look like. Not considering how continuing to work part-time might interact with early benefits and temporarily reduce them. A couple both claiming early at the same time without discussing what that means for whichever of them lives longer. Assuming Social Security will run out entirely, and claiming early out of fear rather than a clear-eyed look at projected funding. While it does face a long-term funding shortfall that Congress will likely need to address, is very different from the program disappearing altogether, and simply never logging into sci.gov to look at personalized numbers and instead relying on rough rules of thumb from friends, forums, or outdated information. Avoiding these mistakes doesn't require complex financial expertise. It requires slowing down at exactly the moment when it feels most natural to move fast. So, should you claim Social Security the moment you're 62 in 2026? The honest answer is, it depends, and now you know on what. It depends on your break-even age relative to your realistic life expectancy. It depends on whether you're married, and what happens to your spouse if you go first. It depends on whether you need the income now or can afford to wait. It depends on your actual earnings record, not a national average. And it depends on how comfortable you are trading a smaller check for more years against a larger check for fewer years. What it doesn't depend on is fear, rumor, or doing whatever the person next to you did. If there's one action to take away from this video, it's this. Before you file anything, log into your sci.gov account, pull up your personalized benefit estimate at 62 at your full retirement age, and at 70 and sit down, ideally with a spouse if you have one, and actually look at the real numbers side by side. That 10-minute step will tell you more about your specific situation than any general rule ever could. If this video helped the decision clearer, the most useful next step is heading to sci.gov and pulling your actual Social Security statement today, while it's fresh in your mind. And if you found this helpful, subscribe for more retirement planning breakdowns like this one. Real numbers, no scare tactics, just what you actually need to know before making decisions that are permanent and personal to your own retirement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.